Hello there, we're back for Ask a Crafter 23 bonus edition! Because I just love you guys so much, I hate to leave them hanging. There are a few questions that I couldn't answer in the last video. By the way, this is Kathy, if you're just tuning in.
Still.
And I'm Lindsay. We had some questions about craft marketing and starting your own craft business. And I didn't really want to jumble that in with all the mixed media questions, because I thought
there's a lot to say for that, and it deserves its own spotlight.
Yeah, and there'll be people that just are curious about craft marketing that, would want to kind of be able to reference that by itself, I think. All right, so what do we have for questions first?
Well, we heard from, 3 people mainly, but I'm sure that covers a lot of people have these kind of thoughts or questions. So Hannah wants to know how to get started in crafting business. She's a card maker.
All right, Hannah. Cards are great because they're easy to package, they don't cost a ton to make, and a lot of businesses will let you
send.
Yeah, and a lot of businesses will let you put a little basket of cards on their counter. Like, if you have a friend that has a convenience store, say, hey, you mind if I put a basket of cards here? Let them have a percentage of the sales or something like that. Our friend Cindy has that kind of situation at the salon where she works.
Yeah, and that's a good place because a lot of women going in and out, and it's something that they schedule regularly, but it will give them a chance to kind of, someone's birthday.
Right,
it's a great place.
Because everyone needs cards, so you just need to kind of put it in front of people, and they usually sell themselves. One place I had a lot of luck selling cards was at an antiques mall. I rented a booth, and I had cards and paintings and earrings, but the cards outsold everything, because I think people would go to the antiques place thinking of, things to buy themselves or presents for people, and they're looking for antiques, but then they think, oh, well, I'll just grab a card while I'm here. And it's handmade, and, I generally sell my cards for between $3 and $5 if they're not painted, if they're, like, crafted cards, and that's what you're going to pay for a Hallmark card, so people don't mind shelling out that kind of money for a handmade card. The other thing to do with cards is something you might want to consider, and we'll talk about this a little bit more in one of the other questions, is getting published, because then it adds a credibility to your
And
craft.
that's what I meant as far as like mailing them, because I know when you were determined, you gave yourself so many months or a year, you were gonna, and if you couldn't get published, then you were done with it. But you really worked at it diligently every month, sent a batch of cards off, and paid attention to what people were looking for, what the magazines were looking for. And
another option for Hannah too would be if she has a blog, then like when you make a card, I used to make 3. I'd make a card, like if I was making you a birthday card, I'd make 3. I'd make 1 to give, 1 to sell, and 1 to send off to a magazine for publication. So like if you have that card on your blog, you can always say, and if anybody wants this card, it's, $3, give me, email me if you're interested, or something like that. So it's low pressure, but if somebody says, oh yeah, I like that card, I could use that, then they can contact you about that too. There's so many Etsy shops, there's so many like online shops that I don't know if people are really selling anything on them. So I don't do the online thing. It just takes too much time to list crafted items for sale for me, but other people I'm sure have some luck with it.
Okay, and Jeannie DW83, how did you get published, and how do you get sponsors?
Getting published, it's harder nowadays because there aren't so many magazines, unfortunately, but there's 2 ways you can go about it. The first thing you want to do is go to the magazine's website that you want to get published in. Look them up online, and they'll have submission guidelines, and they'll tell you exactly how to submit your work. And you want to follow it to the letter, because if they say they want a photo of your card and a brief description of how you made it and a supply list, that's what you send them. You don't wrap up the card and send it to them.
Because send a photocopy, send a photo.
Yes, yes, exactly. Other magazines will say, send the original artwork, include return postage if you want it sent back to you. So that's, you have to, every magazine's different. Rubber Stamp Madness, Scott Publications, they all require you to send the actual artwork, and then if they want it, they'll keep it and publish it, and if they don't, they'll send it back to you if you include postage. What I would do, I would just wait till I had a box full of cards, and I would sit down at the computer one day, and I would type up all the information about them, and I would pop it in the mail and ship it out. And then usually for the next couple of years, you'd see the cards from that box get, sprinkled in through the magazines. I never added return postage because I didn't care if I got it back. They donate it to charity when they're done with it, so I didn't really care. But if you really don't want to let that card out of your site until you know it's going to be published, then just submit it to card making magazines that that will let you know. Card Maker was always really good about saying no thanks if they didn't want, your work. And then if they did want it, you'd mail it to them. But most places don't even give you so much as a, no thank you. So you're kind of up hanging in the air waiting to hear if they want your work or not. And a lot of those magazines have gone digital. So you have to decide whether you want to go through the effort just for it to be in a digital magazine, or if you really want to hold that paper magazine in your hands. For me personally, if I'm going to submit something for publication, it's going to go to a print magazine, because I have a blog, I have a website, I can put it up there and get it out to the world that way.
Yeah.
And I really don't want to be giving away this is going to sound completely cocky, but I don't want to be giving away my genius for free for a competitive website. If it's a website,
when you can put it on your own.
When I can put it on my own.
You have a marketing place. If someone doesn't have a blog, is an interesting blog, then digital publication might be great idea for them. But you are your own publisher, so that makes perfect sense.
Right, and I did the digital thing. Like, first starting out, I submitted to digital magazines, and, but they typically don't pay. So, it's great to get your work out there, but, people have to pay to read those magazines. People can look at it for free on my blog. I'd rather let people look at it for free on my blog. And
probably the most important thing, unlike everybody last week on comments, is not to take it personally.
Oh yeah, and if people don't like it, don't take it personally when you don't get published.
And keep doing it. Don't expect a result in a month, because you were a year doing this.
Yep.
And we're just about ready to give up.
And my first thing got published. Yeah. Yeah.
And then it kind of started just happening and happening and happening, and you just kept going from there.
Yep. I would sit down at the computer one day a month, and I would submit all my scrapbook pages to Creating Keepsakes and Better Homes and Gardens, Scrapbook, etc. And all the big magazines, and every month didn't hear anything back, and I was so discouraged. And then finally Bead Trends picked up some jewelry of mine, and so after that it just kind of, things started happening pretty quickly. But it was every month it was either a year. Was it 2 years or was it 1 year?
I thought you gave yourself a year, and we're coming towards the end of it.
Yeah.
Had got discouraged at time, but decided that was what you had set up, that's what you were going to do, and you did that.
Yeah, and some people will get published on their first shot, but if you want to be published, you have to just be persistent, keep submitting, until something gets picked up. It could take a while. It took me a year, but it's worth it when it happens, if that's something you really want.
Okay, and now we have 1979 Carmen's. Can you tell us your crafting history? How you learned and got started teaching and selling your creations? You seem to have so much knowledge, and I'm curious how you got it all. I bet others would like to know as well. Thanks.
All right, well, I could talk probably 20 minutes on this alone, but I won't. Well, I started off about, my mother was a crafter. She knit and she sewed, and she does decorative painting. So I grew up in that environment. My grandmother lived across the field. She was an avid crocheter. She always had something. She'd watch her stories, and she would crochet slippers all the time. And I loved her crocheted slippers, and it was just amazing that you took string and you made beautiful granny square afghans. I loved granny squares and pot holders and granny square stockings. And I loved all the things my grandmother made that my mother, I think, thought were a little tacky, but I just loved them because the yarn colors, everything was neon and bright, and I just loved it. And
you were born an artist. Yeah, the colors.
I loved it. Loved it. And then I lived across the other side of the field, was a very accomplished watercolor artist, and my mother asked her if she would take me on as a student. She generally didn't take children under the age of 9, and when I was 5, she had me do an audition, kind of. I did a drawing. It was a haunted house. I can remember that I drew a haunted house, and she said, I'll take her. And so I started taking drawing lessons with her, and I got my first box of Prismacolors when I was 5. And so I drew with her for 2 years, and when I was 7, she let me begin watercolors, and I just loved it. It was just like duck to water. And her techniques were much more traditional, much more like the style of Turner. Well, her name was Mrs. Turner, but like in the style of, the English watercolor painters. And she was just very good, and she taught me the right way to do it. And so I learned early on how to paint properly, and I've always painted. And then I always, living in the country, there wasn't much to do, so I would make sculptures from leftover toys, and my father was a builder, so there was always scraps of wood around that I could play with. And I remember sitting in a pile of sawdust next to my father, working on the table saw, making step stools and just pounding stuff together. And I mean, he must have had a heck of a time yanking nails out of stuff so he could burn it or something when I was done. But they just let me have at it. As long as I wasn't in their hair, they let me craft and create.
Doing something constructive.
Yeah.
You spent your time doing something something constructive.
Yeah, there was no cable or Netflix back then. I mean, well, there was cable, not up my road. I'm talking the country. The cable did not come down my street. So it's, yeah, you had to be creative to entertain yourself back then. And then, you know, all through high school, I actually started selling my work in high school. My father taught me the first rule about business, and he said you take $1 and you turn it into $2. So I would buy unfinished birdhouses for $5, and I would paint them and sell them for $10. And, you know, I would paint on, my parents had a hardware store, and they had all these discontinued paneling samples, and so they were masonite in the back, so I would gesso them, and I would paint paintings on them, and I would sell them. So they cost me basically nothing. And so I think that's kind of how I got a little business acumen in there too. And I went to college for broadcasting, and so that was completely other vein, but it did bring it back around. So now I'm able to do art and do media and, you know, kind of tie it all together with like the magazine publishing and also, you know, YouTube and all that stuff just kind of work together. But honestly, just trying stuff, you know, not being afraid to make a mistake or to make a mess. That's the best advice I could give somebody that, you know, wants to learn.
How did you get into doing the teaching at the senior center?
Oh yes, I started off teaching for a little studio downtown. I was actually doing a crappy weekend shift at a radio station, and I was reading the classified ads thinking, oh man, because I was like, I had to commute an hour to work. It was awful. It was a fun job, but man, it was like minimum wage, driving an hour, what a pain. And I saw an ad, and it said artists wanted, and so I'm like, oh, I'm an artist, this sounds great. And so I called it up, and there was a lovely lady that owned a studio, and she needed somebody to teach some kids classes, and so that's where I started off. And then I eventually bought the business from her, and in that time I also got hired to be an art director at a senior center for a nonprofit, and so I developed classes there, and I taught part-time at my studio until I could buy the studio, and I had enough income that I could quit the full-time art director job, and I went part-time there and stayed full-time at the studio until my twins were born, and then it was work from home.
Then everything stopped.
Stopped for a while. Then I was sending out things to magazines every month because that's all I could manage.
In between naps.
In between naps, yes. I had barely enough time to create stuff, but create and submit. But that's pretty much it. So, you know, it's just, I guess that's how I got started. That seems pretty.
That covers that.
Is there anything you think I'm trying to think if there's any other advice I could give about the crafting business. Teaching classes is a great way. If you're a card maker, you can make money teaching classes as well as selling your cards. So, like, you got to figure if you, if you could get a class of, 10 people together and charge $10 for the class, I mean, that's $100 right there. Granted, you'll have materials and stuff, but you probably already own a lot of those materials anyways. Stamps don't cost anything for your students to use. A little re-inker to re-ink your ink pads, not a big deal. Or you may, sell a product.
Your gig at the library might be a good place for people to start, like their community library or community center to try to get into to teach or see if they're interested.
Yes. Yeah, just network, meet people. If people say, I really love that card, say, well, you want to come to a class and learn how to make it? Or I also have cards for sale. It can be a little weird at first to put yourself out there and to, peddle your wares, but it comes to be second nature. I met a nice lady working at the post office yesterday who was a knitter. I said, well, don't you know I have a knitting group that meets every month? You should come, and she showed me the mitten that she was working on. She knits for charity, and nice lady, Honestly, if I see you sitting around knitting something, I'm going to stop and talk to you. That's just kind of the attitude that you get into once you're kind of in that business mode.
Right. Yeah. Oh, always in the business mode.
Yep. Always networking. And plus it's fun to meet people. Well, if you have any questions particularly about art marketing, please leave a comment. I will give you a typed response. This is kind of a weird little bonus Ask a Crafter. So just in the comments here, if you have any questions, advice, tips for craft marketing or art marketing, just leave them and I'm happy to answer them. And I'm sure there'll be other people that will chime in and give you their experiences and advice. Because I know there's quite a few art teachers that watch, independent art teachers. So we can all benefit from each other's knowledge. That's all I have for today. Thank you for watching this little bonus episode of Ask a Crafter. And until next time, happy crafting.
Bye, all.